If you're going to coach someone or you're going to teach someone mentor, or however you want to word it, you need to know who they are as an individual. There's no point in giving someone a bunch of paperwork and documents to read and instructions on how to do a job if they struggled with reading. Or giving someone 5 instructions at once because that's how you can work. Well, they might not have that capacity, or they might not be able to interpret 5 instructions and get confused. If you see something, say something, because saying nothing is doing something. And they're not cheap labor or anything like that. It's put them in the category of this is a person. You try and figure out what makes them tick. So, obviously, I'm not perfect, but they may have a misconception of that, or they may not understand that I had my struggles too. And I think as leaders, that's something everyone can do, is explain those stories and just show that our weak points too, to make the other person feel like, it is normal to fail, or it is normal to try and not succeed. If you're scared of that word failure, okay, you didn't succeed that time, try again. And that's basically what I was taught. So if you have had that relationship with that person working with you for 3-4 weeks, and you notice that they're off one day, I call it raining in their head, have a conversation about it. What's happened today? I've noticed you're not on your A game, or you look a bit down. Is everything all right? And just be a person with that person. It's the best thing you can do, honestly.
Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast bringing practical leadership to every tradie. I'm Ashley Baltecki, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. Every episode you'll hear from tradies across all industries, sharing how they apply leadership in their role, regardless of their title or experience. Real stories, real people, so you can learn from them and level up your leadership on site. In this episode, we cover the importance of relationships for bringing out the best out of others and how we can build those relationships within our teams. Today, we're joined by David Mehmel, and he brings something to this conversation that most tradies don't experience: dedicated full-time responsibilities in the mentoring and development space. Most of us who spent time on the tools have played a mentoring role at some point, showing an apprentice the ropes, answering questions, and keeping them out of trouble. But doing that alongside our actual job can be very different from making it our sole focus. Dave has spent 16 years in and around the automotive industry, starting on the tools before stepping into roles where developing people wasn't just part of the job, it was the job. For the past 3 years, David's been working as an apprentice trainer and mentor in the dealership environment, and has recently stepped into a safety coordinator role as well. But what drives him goes beyond the job title. He's focused on building a team culture that actually sticks, supporting mental health on the tools, and creating workplaces where apprentices don't just get through their time, they want to be there. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today, Dave.
Yeah, good morning.
Now, the first question I ask all the guests is, what does leadership mean to you?
Well, for me, leadership it's when people need to set the example and set the standard. It's something where there's obviously different types of leadership, but I think that people just need to set the tone, or they need to set the standard, who are there to support, to be with their staff, and try and get the best out of people while also trying to get the best result at the end of the day. It's a definition of people who are on the front. You want to inspire the people around you. You want to push them to be better than they already are. Yeah, just not leaving people behind is a big one.
It sounds like really taking people on a journey and getting the best out of them, because you're setting an example that gives them the opportunity to be their best, because you're trying to be your best, and there's clear expectations around that.
Yeah, completely right. Like, if you're surrounded by people who are trying to encourage people to be better than themselves, rather than just obey direction and go from there.
Where did your leadership journey begin? Was there a point in your career where you took on responsibility for the first time, or you saw yourself as a leader for the first time?
I remember being 16, working at a supermarket and being left alone to run one whole department for myself over the weekend. But talking trades-wise, probably back to when I was early in my apprenticeship. There was a lot of apprentices at work, rather large workshop, and I found myself coaching a lot of apprentices as a third, fourth year, just because there was a lot of people around, but they didn't want to teach apprentices. They weren't approachable, kind of thing. In fairness to them, they're paid to do a job, and some tradies aren't really interested in showing the next generation of people, and that's okay, and they're there to put bread on the table. But at the end of the day, I ended up in that role where I was approachable, I was there for others, and just took everyone under my wing.
It's really interesting, because I know this is a regular experience across many industries, not just our trade in the mechanical field, where it's such a big part of the job, but it's not ever really in the job description. You're never really taught how to do that mentoring and coaching piece if you do have apprentices around you or you take on your first apprentice. You've obviously had a taste for that pretty early, even while you're an apprentice. What does mentoring on the tools look like versus just supervising someone?
I like to understand the person I'm working with. So I want to know how they learn. Are they someone who's hands-on? Are they someone who needs to be spoken to? Do they need to read it? I like to understand that from people first before I even proceed on the journey with them. You need to show people what you're doing in the job regardless, but trying to figure out who they are and how they interpret information. It shows that if they can absorb it, it helps the relationship. Coaching people, it's about a relationship at the end of the day. If you're going to coach someone or you're going to teach someone, mentor, however you want to word it, you need to know who they are as an individual. There's no point in giving someone a bunch of paperwork and documents to read and instructions on how to do a job if they struggled with reading. Or giving someone 5 instructions at once because that's how you can work. Well, they might not have that capacity, or they might not be able to interpret 5 instructions and get confused, do them out of order. They might be the type of people you can only give 1 or 2 and constantly check in that way. So for me, I like to understand who I'm with, trying to figure them out as a person before trying to proceed from there.
It's really powerful insight, and I guess before I get into the question around relationships, because I feel like there's a lot we could talk about in that space, what does it look like when you're getting to know a person and you're trying to figure out how they learn? Because that isn't very black and white, and obviously, as you've shared, there's a lot of diversity and nuance in terms of understanding individuals and where they're at and how they think and how they learn and even what their goals and what they're driven by. So what does that look like when you're getting to know a person to understand how to get the best out of them?
I like to talk. I want to have a conversation with them. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know their purpose. Why did they choose this industry? What brings them to work every day? What home life is like, so I can see what supports they've got around them. And I think that having that conversation early on in the piece, it shows them that 1, you're interested, 2, you care. Just treat them like a person. Like that, because that's what they are. At the end of the day, they're not cheap labor or anything like that. It's put them in the category of this is a person. You try and figure out what makes them tick. Try and figure out how they interpret information and how they learn, and then just develop the relationship from there. It's never going to be perfect the whole time. There's always going to be ups and downs, but if you can do that, that already starts the relationship in a positive place, and it can only hopefully get better and better once you get past all those little mistakes and things that are going to come because you're dealing with apprentices. But if you just treat them like people, it's the biggest thing. Even as managers in any sort of position, any sort of role, you've got to remember people are people at the end of the day.
I love that approach and philosophy you called out, that it is not just about mentoring apprentices. It might be when you have probably a less hands-on but still a coaching relationship, trying to bring out the best of someone in your team or lift their performance or help them reach a new goal or learn a new task. Like those skills are very transferable across different demographics of people. At the risk of putting you on the spot with this question, this has just occurred to me because I've been having a lot of conversations with the industry, and there does seem to be a cohort of people that have a brand or a representation where they're seen as not having goals, and I guess not really having much for them outside of work, and they are just showing up to just get paid. How do you approach developing those people? Because it's not our job to make them more driven if they're not as driven as we might be sometimes. But how do you get the best out of people like that when maybe they don't give you as much to work with in terms of knowing them, understanding them, and helping them get close to what they want and aligning it with business objectives?
I mean, look, what's that old saying? Rome wasn't built in a day. So to me, I chip away. Just develop that relationship, try and develop that friendship with them. Keep it professional, obviously, but essentially, if you get that from the start, you could potentially inspire someone, or you can push them in a direction. Like, I'll put my hand up and say, when I started as a mechanic, I didn't want to be a mechanic. And I didn't want to be a mechanic probably until I was a 4th year.
Wow.
It was just one of those things where I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school. So going to work, it was structured, it was process, it was a decent place to go. There were some good people there. Thought I could learn something along the way. Like, originally I wanted to be an auto elec, and then I couldn't find an auto elec apprenticeship at the time, so I had to go with light vehicle, and it was hard. There were certain days where I remember sitting on the steps at home planning, do I go to work today? As a 3-month-old apprentice. With people who are like that now, you've got to figure out what and how they want to be there. What's their driver? I've just recently worked with one apprentice who was a bit similar. He tried, 4 or 5 different trades, and for this person, their drive is actual training. So if they can see investment in terms of training, and this took me a good 12 months to get that out of them, because it was a rocky relationship. There were certain things going right, certain things going wrong. And then we just sort of sat down and had a chat, and I was just like, mate, what is it that's going to keep coming bringing you back here? Like, we've been through this for the last 12 months. What do you want to see from us so that we can get the best out of you? And what just said it was, I just want to see investment from you in me. And training, brand training, additional training, that is the driver. So it took a full 12 months to figure out what it's going to be. And even for me, like I said, it took me years to actually go, you know what? It was probably a confidence thing too for me at the end of the day. No, it's a big problem with apprentices now. They do struggle with their confidence, or a lot of people, not just apprentices. But it took me about 3 years to actually be confident in my craft before I would actually back myself and, I'm going to make this decision. And I know I'm 99% sure that this is going to work.
I really appreciate that story, because the 12-month time frame, I feel like for myself, I'm quite an impatient person, and that's because there's a million things going through my mind and never enough time. But without understanding what it looks like from someone who's experienced it, it would be easy to feel like, I'm 3 months in, why isn't this person performing? Why haven't I figured them out? And to give up on them. But knowing that sometimes it does take that long, and it might be trust on both sides, or them going on their own journey with their own peer network and support network outside of the workplace, that's achieved I assume a positive outcome. But the specificity of that, when I think so many workplaces are struggling with apprentices like that who aren't necessarily motivated in the way that we might want them to be, and the way that previous generations have been, that there is that tension there, and probably impatience, because as an industry, we're just under the pump, and we don't never have enough time, we never have enough people, and we're probably unconsciously putting that pressure on the people we're trying to develop, whether that's apprentices or even just new people into our team who have slightly different lived experience in the industry.
Yeah.
It's interesting you bring up confidence though. I know when I was an apprentice mentor, that came up a lot, and I talked to a lot of businesses about it at a gendered level as well, in terms of the difference in attitudes and difference in confidence between the typical male apprentice and the typical female apprentice, knowing that everyone's different, so it can look slightly different, but there is sometimes a pattern. How do you build confidence from a mentoring and a leadership point of view in those around you?
For me, I look at what the person's strengths are at the start, because if you can build on their strengths early on, that will build confidence. I do get them to identify what their weaknesses are though. I generally do ask that question in an interview when I'm interviewing a new apprentice, which a lot of people don't have answers for. But the ones that do, I love it, because they can actually see that, okay, these are the areas I need to work on. And then once someone is on board with me, I'll have that same discussion. Or I'll look at their performance over 2-3 months and ask them, what are you struggling with? Find out what it is. Try and get them some extra, even if it's additional work. If they're the person who wants to do some extracurricular stuff, cool, I'll help them out with that 100%. If they're not that motivated or their schedule's busy, okay, cool. But let's try and empower this person or encourage this person to want to do that extra work, or this is an area where I know I'm not great with. Who are my supports around me that I can lean on? Encourage that sort of stuff. So if that person is supported, then they hopefully will have the confidence to, over time, build that up. That took me a long time. I know I needed to do a lot of self-work as well, because I basically had that thought in my head of, if I don't stick with this, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I need to be good at this. And that was almost like a big push for me to go, okay, get your act together, mate. And you just have to back yourself. I specifically remember, even for myself, going through some diagnostic work, and I knew what I needed to replace on the car, but I sort of sat there for an extra 10 minutes going, no, I know I've checked that, and my powers are good, my earths are good, my communications are good, this is working, that's not working. And I knew that what the faulty part was, but I was like almost scared to go and quote the part up, because I was like, but what if it doesn't fix the car? My mentor at the time come and chat with me, and I went through all the steps and they just said, mate, you're at the point where you've got to quote this part, get it over the line, just do it. What's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work, we'll fix it anyway. I can't, no one else is going to fix this for me. No, nothing else is showing me that it's going to work. Quote the part, fit the part, see if it fixes it. I tell that story to my apprentices now. Like, obviously, I'm not perfect, but they may have a misconception of that, or they may not understand that I had my struggles too. And I think as leaders, that's something everyone can do, is explain those stories and just show that our weak points too, to make the other person feel like, yeah, okay, oh, it is normal to fail, or it is normal to try and not succeed. You know, if you're scared of that word failure, okay, you didn't succeed that time, try again. And that's basically what I was taught.
I always think back to when I was an apprentice and being in a very niche application of the trade, rebuilding engines. I knew logically that most of my supervisors had blown up an engine before, because that's just the cost of a mistake in that game. Yet whenever I made a mistake, as much as I logically knew that, I emotionally had never had the stories from anyone to be like, this is what happened when I made a mistake, this is how I felt, this is what I learned from it. As much as I logically knew it, no one was sharing those stories. So I took mistakes so personally, and it's a normal experience.
Yeah, completely right.
So you're obviously very passionate about apprentices, and that's the space that you work in. And we know that statistically apprentice retention isn't great across the trades. How much of apprentice retention comes down to leadership and culture?
I think all of it, really. I think culture is a huge one. I think culture in any workplace, young people especially, if you have a toxic culture, they will highlight it straight away. Everyone at every level, they will identify that straight away. Because usually if it's not a school leaver, if someone's coming into the trade, apart from having an interest in that trade, they're leaving a workplace for a reason. Everyone needs to remember that. When you hire someone, they're obviously getting out of their previous employment for a specific reason. And if you're in a toxic workplace, they will highlight that immediately, and they won't be there very long. So culture's huge. You may not get the best workplace with the best relationships in every single place, because we're humans at the end of the day. We've got to be real. But if you can get both to a similar sort of level, or if you've got really good relationships, like for me, for example, I didn't do 10 years at BMW for a specific reason. I actually enjoyed going back there every day. The culture was good. The relationships there were great. So you've got to have that in the workplace. That's something that starts from all the leaders, because when there's miscommunications, or when there's a message that's received by the wider team, they just see that as an issue up the top, or see it as everything funneling down the chain. So it's really important to, even if you've got people in the wings and they are the supports, or they are the relationships, you do your team bondings, even something as simple as a toolbox talk. If you see something, say something, because saying nothing is doing something. That in itself, to me, instills camaraderie in our group. And that is backed by management from my end as well.
There is obviously that standards and that expectation piece that comes from leadership at every level. But for those on the ground floor, when they're thinking about their role in relationships and their role in the team culture, what are the practical skills that the workshop needs to support that culture and to support those strong relationships?
I think that having a process within the workshop of how things work and sticking to that process, that's one of the best things you can have. It reassures the workers, because if they see that process fail somewhere along the way, then something's gone wrong in their head. Okay, what do we need to do to fix this? Or, hey, this part of the process isn't working, I can't do my job. And they've got access to support to then fix that. They then feel heard. They then feel like, okay, what I say matters. The process is the strongest part of that. The other practical skill that you can do with staff is just having that person to hear them out. We're all working in trades. Wherever you are, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to need to have a vent. It's very important to feel heard. So having someone that they can safely have that chat to. Some places it is the HR person. Other places it is your service manager, or someone within the team who can have that conversation, make them feel heard, show them that much change will happen, or this is a part where I'm sorry, you need to trust the process here. And sometimes the process has to fail to go forwards or be fixed. And just have it, like, as a tech or as a worker, hearing that, okay, I felt heard. May not get my result right this second, but there is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
I was at an event where the keynote speaker was saying that what young people need more than anything right now is hope. And I feel like that's true for all of us in a workplace as well. Just having that hope, and sometimes having that big picture might mean that there's not a lot of hope, but there's still people that support you, and that can maybe be the hope sometimes when the results are slow, especially in the bigger organizations where change moves very slowly.
Yeah.
But in regards to that mentoring piece, I know that there's always people in a team who struggle with the skills of mentoring and coaching an apprentice, and you've really clearly shown how relationships are the foundation of that being successful. But for someone who probably struggles a little bit with like the nitty gritty of how do I communicate what I'm saying, how do I help them understand what I'm doing, and they might struggle to show or articulate, what would you say is an approach or something that they could do themselves to help them on the technical piece of I'm teaching something?
I think the first thing for that individual, you need to understand what you are doing is tricky. So be kind to yourself because you're learning at the same time as they are. You're trying to learn how to understand a person who's trying to learn how you work. It's not easy. So firstly, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work straight away. It's that what I've said earlier. You've got to keep trying, try from different angles. But I think the biggest thing that they can do is just spend time together. Develop that personal relationship with that person. You don't know them. They don't know you. You're strangers. It's like when you meet anyone and a friendship or relationship develops over time. Like, you need to spend time together. Communication is the biggest thing. And if you're not communicating, well, okay, some people don't like to talk. That's all right. But if you're with that person working on the same job, well, you're going to pick up what their habits are. You're going to pick up where they put their tools. You're going to pick up little things about that person. And that can spark a bit of a common interest. Or, hey, I noticed you didn't have such and such for morning tea today. Everything all right? You see a habit change, or you see a personality trait change. Simple as that. It comes back, like I said as well, like treating them like a person. Well, you're a person too. Not everyone's going to be on their A game every single day. So if you have had that relationship with that person working with you for 3-4 weeks, and you notice that they're off one day, I call it raining in their head, have a conversation about it. What's happened today? I've noticed you're not on your A game, or you look a bit down. Is everything all right? And just be a person with that person. It's the best thing you can do, honestly.
I think as well, you showcase that we need to pay attention to each other, and it's easy to have our heads down and forget to think critically about the things we notice about other people's patterns and their energy and their attitudes. As a mentor, as someone who might be seeing that someone might be having a difficult mental health day, or there's something going on in their lives, and just being a good teammate, let alone being potentially a mentor or a support person.
Yeah, completely right. Yeah.
Now, the final question I ask all the guests on the podcast is, if you could give advice to tradies, whether they're apprentices, whether they're qualified, whether they're stepping off the tools or they've been in a leadership role for a while, what would be your advice as to how they can practice leadership every day, regardless of where they're at?
The best thing that you can do is look after yourself as a start, because how can you help someone if you're not running at 100%, or if your 100% is 60% for that one day? That's okay. Like, that's your limit for that day. But you've got to take care of you before you can help someone else. You can't help someone properly if you're not in the same space. And like, that comes back to that part of being kind to yourself. Talk to yourself how you would talk to a friend, not how you're up here where the bad thoughts happen here and there, or you beat yourself down. You've got to be kind to yourself to then help other people. I worked for this one dealer principal. I was a third-year apprentice, call it, and basement where we parked customer cars used to flood when there was heavy rain. So I'd just gone downstairs to get my next car, and it was starting to flood a bit, so I started squeegeeing some water. And this dealer principal come to me, and he was only a month or two into it, and he called me over. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm squeegeeing the floors because of the water." He's like, No, what are you doing? I don't understand. He's like, "What car are you working on?" "Oh, this one here." "Right, give me the squeegee, mate." And I thought I was going to get in trouble. And he turned around and he went, No. He goes, "I want you to go work on that car because your time's more valuable to me working on that car than squeegeeing the floors." And then he took his blazer off and started squeegeeing the floors himself. And I was like, okay, this is someone that I want to work for. You've got a dealer principal 2 months into it who is happy to do a first year's job, really something anyone could do really to avoid an accident. But he wanted me on the cars working, and he would squeeze you to fall. I thought that blew my mind at the time. That was someone who clearly knew what to do for other people. It's just one of those things where I don't think you see it enough, especially in trades. And a lot of old school sort of people might be like, oh, that's soft, or that's whatever you want to label it. Mate, it's 2026. We have to get with the times now, because it's completely different doing a trade now to doing it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, so on. We are in a different realm right now. Everyone needs to move forwards. Everyone needs to come together. And kindness is something I don't think we see enough. Like I said, being kind to yourself, kind to others, and that just develops from there.
You've shared so much insight and such great examples about not only the importance of mentoring and how we need to invest in relationships at every level, whether we're an apprentice helping the next person, whether we're on the tools, whether we're a leader who's mentoring and coaching a team, but you've also really shared so much about not only the importance of relationship, but the potential impact we all have if we look after ourselves and think about the example we set for others. So thank you so much for everything you've shared on the podcast today, Dave. I've taken a lot away from this chat and I'm feeling quite inspired and motivated.
No worries. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in a fortnight with another tradie diving into how they practice leadership in the trades. If this episode landed for you, tap like, subscribe to Tradies Who Lead, or follow us on socials for more stories from your favourite guests on the show.